Jerusalem had fallen. The fighting was over, but the city did not return to peace. When the sun rose over Jerusalem, it revealed silence, not celebration. When resistance ended, the killing did not. The city was overwhelmed. Men, women, and children were not spared. Jerusalem was taken and emptied. The Crusaders moved quickly to secure the holy sites. Prayers were spoken where blood had recently been shed. Victory was declared, but it did not feel pure. Victory did not bring unity. The leaders of the crusade argued over control of the city. Godfrey of Bouillon refused the title of king. Jerusalem would not be ruled easily. Jerusalem was surrounded by enemies. Supplies were limited. Victory inside the walls meant little if the city could not be held. Jerusalem had been taken, but peace would not follow. The First Crusade was not over yet. Jerusalem had fallen. The fighting was over. The shouting had stopped. But when the sun rose over the city, it did not reveal celebration. It revealed silence. Smoke drifted slowly above the rooftops. The streets were empty. Gates stood open, not in welcome, but in exhaustion. For weeks, Jerusalem had been a place of fear, of hunger, of waiting. Now it was a city that had been broken open. The Crusaders had achieved what many believed impossible. They had taken the holy city. The goal of the First Crusade, at last, stood before them. But victory did not arrive with joy. It arrived quietly, heavily, almost uneasily. Men who had marched for years now stood still. Soldiers who had survived hunger, disease, and battle found themselves unsure how to feel. The road to Jerusalem had been long. It had consumed lives before the city was ever reached. And now, as the city lay open before them, there was no sudden release, no sense of relief, only the weight of what had been done. Bodies were cleared from the streets, fires burned low, the sound of battle was replaced by the sound of wind moving through stone corridors. Jerusalem did not welcome its conquerors. It simply endured them. This was not the ending the Crusaders had imagined when they first left Europe. There were no cheering crowds, no triumphant return, only a city that had survived yet another conquest. And for the men who stood inside its walls, one truth slowly became clear. Taking Jerusalem was only the beginning. When the resistance ended, the killing did not. The walls had been taken. The defenders were broken. But inside the city, the violence continued. Jerusalem did not fall in a single moment. It collapsed slowly, street by street, home by home. Those who had survived the siege now faced something worse. There were no rules, no mercy demanded, no authority strong enough to stop what followed. The Crusaders had come from many lands. They spoke different languages. They followed different leaders. And now, inside the city, there was no unified control. Victory had shattered discipline. Fear turned into fury, and fury spread unchecked. Chroniclers would later struggle to describe what happened next. Some wrote with pride, others with horror. Many avoided the details entirely. What is certain is this: the city was overwhelmed. Homes were emptied, streets were cleared. Entire neighborhoods fell silent. Jerusalem, a city sacred to many, became a place where survival depended on chance more than mercy. This was not an accident. It was the result of years of suffering, months of starvation, and a final explosion of violence that no one could fully control. By the time order was restored, the city had changed forever. The victory the Crusaders had dreamed of now carried a shadow that could not be ignored. Jerusalem had been taken, but it had also been emptied. Once the city was under control, The Crusaders turned their attention to the places that had drawn them here. Jerusalem was more than stone and walls. It was the center of belief, a city shaped by faith, memory, and centuries of devotion. The holy sites were secured quickly. Guards were placed at entrances. Banners were raised. Order, at least on the surface, began to return. Inside churches and sanctuaries, the Crusaders gathered in silence. They knelt where generations before them had prayed. They spoke words of gratitude. They believed they had fulfilled a divine mission. But the city around them had not yet recovered. Outside the holy spaces, the streets were still empty. The air still carried smoke. Jerusalem had been claimed, but it had not been healed. This contradiction was impossible to escape. Sacred rituals unfolding in a city still marked by violence. For many Crusaders, this moment confirmed their belief that the suffering had been justified. For others, it was a moment of unease, a quiet realization that victory had come at a terrible cost. Chroniclers described processions, prayers, and ceremonies of thanksgiving. But beneath those accounts lay a city that had been transformed not only by faith, but by force. Jerusalem had changed hands many times before, yet each conquest left its mark, and this one would echo far beyond the city's walls. The Crusaders had achieved their goal, but the meaning of that victory would be debated for generations to come. Victory did not bring unity. The city had been taken, but Jerusalem was not yet governed. Almost immediately, the leaders of the crusade faced a question they had avoided for years. Who would rule Jerusalem? The crusade had never been a single army. It was a collection of princes, nobles, and warbands, each loyal to their own leader, their own cause, their own ambition. During the march east, these divisions had nearly destroyed them. Now, inside the holy city, they threatened to tear victory apart. Some leaders believed Jerusalem should become a kingdom, ruled like any other conquest. Others argued the city was too sacred to be worn as a crown. At the center of this debate stood Godfrey of Bouillon. Godfrey was respected. He had fought from Antioch to Jerusalem. He had endured the same hunger, the same suffering, the same uncertainty. When offered the title of king, Godfrey refused. He declared that he would not wear a crown of gold in the city where Christ had worn a crown of thorns. Instead, Godfrey accepted a different title, Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. It was a compromise, one meant to calm tensions, not eliminate them. Beneath the language of humility, power still mattered. Control of Jerusalem meant control of pilgrimage, influence across the region, and legitimacy in the eyes of Europe. The city had been taken by force, but it would have to be held through fragile alliances. The Crusaders had achieved unity only in battle. In peace, their divisions returned. Jerusalem now stood at the center of a new experiment, a Christian state born out of exhaustion, ambition, and uncertainty. And beyond the walls, enemies were already gathering. Jerusalem had been taken, but it had not been secured. The Crusaders stood inside the walls, exhausted, divided, and dangerously exposed. The city was far from home. Supplies were limited. Reinforcements were uncertain. Jerusalem had been conquered by men who were already running out of strength. Beyond the walls, the world had not stopped. Muslim forces across the region were already responding to the city's fall. Messengers rode south, armies began to gather, and Jerusalem, newly taken, became a target. To the south, near the coast, an enemy force was forming. The Crusaders knew the danger well. If they remained inside the city, they could be surrounded, cut off, starved into surrender. The walls that had protected Jerusalem could just as easily become a prison. Scouts were sent beyond the gates. Watchers climbed the towers. Every horizon was studied. Victory had bought them time, nothing more. The First Crusade now faced its final test. Not in the streets of Jerusalem, but beyond them. If the Crusaders failed now, the city they had bled for would be lost. And so, with strength nearly spent and unity still fragile, they prepared to march once more. This time, not toward Jerusalem, but away from it. The Crusaders had taken Jerusalem, but the war was far from over. Just days after the capture, the Fatimids of Egypt marched north, determined to reclaim the city. What followed would become a clash that would decide the fate of the Holy Land. King Godfrey and his weary army, though victorious in Jerusalem, faced a new threat. Supplies were scarce, morale fragile, yet they knew the Fatimid army was approaching from the south, vast and relentless. From the south, the Fatimid host moved swiftly. Thousands of soldiers, gleaming armor and banners waving, advanced along the coastal plains, confident of victory. The Crusaders left Jerusalem behind them. They did not march as conquerors. They marched as men who knew this would decide everything. If they failed now, Jerusalem would fall just as quickly as it had been taken. South of the city, near the coast, a Fatimid army from Egypt was advancing. Thousands of soldiers, fresh, supplied, confident. The Crusaders were none of those things. They were exhausted, undersupplied, and badly outnumbered. Near Ascalon, the Fatimid army made camp. Their tents spread across the plain. Their numbers were overwhelming. The Crusaders could see the smoke from miles away. Many believed this would be their last battle. There would be no retreat, no walls to hide behind. Victory meant survival. Defeat meant annihilation. At dawn, the Crusaders did something unexpected. They attacked first. Moving quickly, they struck the Fatimid camp before the army could fully form. Confusion spread instantly. Horses broke loose. Lines collapsed. Orders were lost in the noise. The battle spread across the plain. It was not elegant. It was not controlled. It was brutal, confused, and exhausting. The Crusaders fought knowing there would be no second chance. Slowly, against all expectation, the Fatimid lines began to break. By midday, the battle was over. The Fatimid army withdrew. The Crusaders had survived. But there was no celebration. Too many were dead. Too many were wounded. Victory had come at the very edge of collapse. The Battle of Ascalon was the final battle of the First Crusade. Jerusalem was secured. The vows were fulfilled. Soon after, many of the Crusaders turned back toward Europe. They left behind a fragile kingdom, surrounded by enemies, and born from exhaustion and blood. The crusade was over.